Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you back to today's live session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. As you know, every single day at 10 a.m. we are here for you to decode the day's Hindu newspaper, to discuss some of the most important news stories both from the mains and from the prelims examination point of view. Before we begin today's newspaper analysis, a very important announcement for all of you. As you would know, we here at BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS are running a mega scholarship scheme under which there are a few handful of seats that are available at 60% off for both our online classroom programs and also the offline one. All that you have to do is make sure that you click on the link that is given in the pinned comment section. So you'll see that link, you can click there and you will be able to ensure that you can register for this. These are topics that we'll be discussing today. From the mains examination point of view, we'll be discussing about the SDG progress, that is the progress of Sustainable Development Goals, more specifically the progress in case of Bhopal. The second topic that we have will be about how Gujarat is trying to become India's hub for green hydrogen. As you know, the government of India has been trying to give a push to green hydrogen, and how is it that Gujarat wants to become a hub for that. Then from the prelims examination point of view, we will be discussing about how the center government has introduced an ordinance to take back or to reverse the Supreme Court order. That the order that was given by the Supreme Court recently, under which the Supreme Court had said that the services in Delhi would be under the Delhi government and not under the Lieutenant Governor. Then we'll be discussing about how the Supreme Court now is back to its full strength of 34 with a couple of new judges being given the oath yesterday, and now we again have 34 judges in the Supreme Court. And in the end, we'll be discussing about how arsenic exposure, especially in our foods, can be extremely bad for us. These are the topics that we have for today's discussion. So let's begin without any further delay. The first topic that we have that we'll be discussing here is about the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the SDG. Now, the topic here says that in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, the one city that has made a lot of progress is Bhopal. This article also is actually written by the Municipal Commissioner of Bhopal Municipal Corporation, and that is why the article mainly focuses on what Bhopal is doing and how Bhopal is trying to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals. Before we go ahead, I hope all of you know by now what exactly are Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals are a total of 17 goals that the nations around the world are trying to achieve by 2030. And I'll show you those goals as well. Now, what has happened is, since nations around the world have to achieve these goals by 2030, each nation individually also is trying to do something so that they can come closer to the goal. For example, within India, the Niti Aayog also publishes a report that talks about how individual states are performing in Sustainable Development Goals. I'll show you that report as well. So Niti Aayog breaks down these goals state-wise and gives us the state-wise data. Now, the article is about how the city-wise data should also be published, how that is important. This is where Bhopal has become the leader. Bhopal is the first city in India to join the growing global movement of localization of Sustainable Development Goals. So as per this idea, it's not just the entire country that would have to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals. We have to break it state-wise and then we have to break it city-wise. So Bhopal also would submit a voluntary local review to actually tell how many goals have they achieved and which goals have they not achieved so far. There are 193 member states of the UN that are trying to achieve these goals by 2030. There are 17 broad goals and there are 169 targets in total. Now, India has made a lot of progress in many of these goals. However, there are some goals which we have still not been able to achieve. If you look at the Niti Aayog report, as per the Niti Aayog, at least 23 states and union territories have prepared a vision document based on the Sustainable Development Goals. But even now, at least 65% of the targets could not possibly be achieved without urban local stakeholders. And we'll discuss why, because see, if you look at what these goals are, it is necessary that you have participation of local governments and the local leaders as well. Only then we could have these goals that are actually achievable. This vision document does not really have to contain all the targets. The vision document that Bhopal will publish, or the vision document that all other cities or many other cities around the world are publishing, those vision documents may have only those goals which the city wants to publish. So it's not absolutely necessary that all the goals will have to be published or all the targets will have to be carried out here. Bhopal or whichever city is giving out this document and publishing it in the public eye, they can choose whichever targets, whichever goals are the ones that they actually want to tell the world. So it's not really one set parameter to publish these documents. These documents can change from city to city. Now, what is Bhopal's plan? This document of Bhopal will not be just from Bhopal administration. It's a joint collaboration between Bhopal Municipal Corporation, the UN Habitat and 23 other local stakeholders. What they have done is they have identified 56 developmental projects across 3 different verticals, that is people, planet and prosperity, and they will be identifying how basic infrastructure is being built to help achieve these sustainable development goals. You might also know how a lot of cities in Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal, Indore, etc. have been ranking very high when it comes to Swachh Bharat ranking. These cities have also been doing a lot of great work when it comes to using or recycling of waste, segregation of waste. So this does not come as a surprise that Bhopal is taking a lead in this case as well. The government of or the local administration of Bhopal in this case is the first city in India to publish this document, while other cities around the world have also been doing this. For example, Canterbury in the UK, there also this document has been published. The difference is in Canterbury in UK, the government has not published this document. It is the local people, the local residents who have published a document where they are telling how much progress has their city made in the sustainable development goals. What it shows is that we should not just be dependent on the government, that the government or the local administration should release these documents. Even if there are well-intentioned citizens, the citizens across the city, if they want to publish such documents, they can also do the same. Now, these are the 17 sustainable development goals. I hope by now all of you are very well aware of them. These are important. Please try and remember these. The first one is no poverty, then zero hunger, good health, well-being, quality education. As you know, if you see these are pertaining different sectors. There are some about environment as well, life on land, life below water, climate action. Then there's some about social change, zero hunger, zero poverty. It also talks about affordable clean energy, reducing inequalities, so on and so forth. So there are a total of 17 of these goals. These are the rankings I was talking about that are published by the Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog gives a ranking of how different states in India individually are performing on these goals. So from the Niti Aayog website, this is the latest ranking I could find. If you see amongst the states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Goa usually remain at the top. If you look towards the bottom, you will see Bihar, Jharkhand, Assam, UP, Arunachal Pradesh, etc. Amongst the union territories, Chandigarh is performing the best, followed by Puducherry, Lakshadweep, etc. Again, this is a kind of an indication to show the world how well the states or the union territories in India are performing. This is also a way to give a push to competitive federalism. Because as you know, competitive federalism means try and build a healthy competition between the states and the union territories so that they try and perform better. This is also an indication, or this is also a parameter that can be used by politicians. Let's say when they go and ask for votes, they can tell the people, see how well we have governed, we have come till the top of this ranking. This is how the politicians can also be encouraged. Now, I also wanted to show you what is the current status of India when it comes to these goals. How far are we from achieving these goals? What are some of the areas where we have worked well and what are the areas where we are lagging right now? So recently there was a Lancet report that came out that talks about India's status on the SDGs. So there are a few of them I would like to share with you. First, India is not on target in 19 of the 33 sustainable development goal indicators. Of the 19 off-target indicators, the worst ones are anemia amongst women, pregnant, non-pregnant women between 2016 and 2021. Apart from that, Other off-target indicators include wasting and overweight children, anemia, child marriage, partner violence, tobacco use. Again, this is where we have not been able to do satisfactory. Apart from that, districts that are not really doing very well are mainly in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar and Odisha. Even the aspirational districts, which are a part of the aspirational districts program, they have also not been doing very well. This was our first article for the day. I am not able to see any chat, so I'll see if the technical issue is resolved, or I can see your chat and I can answer your questions. But this was the first topic for it. Let me quickly see if I can restore the chat, because I can't see the chat from here right now. Just give me a moment. Just a second. Okay, no worries. We will move on to the second topic. And okay, I see some of the chats here. Where to upload the mains answer? You will see the answer writing portal link in the description of the video. From there you can actually go to the portal where you can actually upload the answers. Ashwini, I never said Bhopal is the #1 cleanest city in India. I said that Bhopal, Indore are the ones that are doing pretty well in Swachh Bharat ranking. I never said that Bhopal is doing the best. Don't worry. Mnemonic for SDG? I'm not sure, Arvind, you understand what mnemonic is. SDG itself is a short form, so I'm not sure what mnemonic do you want. Just a second. So, there are a lot of people who are asking what is VLR, VLR, VLR. I would really advise you to pay attention. This is what VLR is. Voluntary Local Review. This is given on the very first slide. Voluntary Local Review. That is the document that Bhopal will publish so that it tells the world how much progress have they made in Sustainable Development Goals. That is VLR. Fatima is asking, all countries around the world follow SDG. So it's a kind of a goal that is not mandatory on the countries, but yes, most of the countries are trying to achieve as much as possible. Shantanu is saying, why is there poor drainage system even today? See, Shantanu, the problem is the cities that we have in India are just not built to handle so many people. Like if you see, most of the people in the working age population are actually concentrated in a handful of the cities in India. Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai. So if you actually see, these cities were never built to handle so much of population pressure. So there's a lot of pressure on not just the resources, but also drainage system, etc. So there's one part of the problem that the infrastructure is very old, not really suitable to handle such a long or such a huge population pressure. Secondly, again, the municipalities are not really doing as much as they should. They lack funds, and that is why the drainage system, which is their responsibility, is not up to the mark. To all the 20 people asking how to remember SDG, my answer would be, read it again and again and remember it. If I had a clue, I would have given it to you. I would advise you to stop spamming the chat with the same comment time and time again. I don't have a trick of how to remember SDG. I can tell you that you have to remember. Now this is your problem, how to remember and how not to remember. There can't be a trick for everything, right? Try and read it 4 or 5 times and you will start remembering it. As simple as that. Let's move ahead then. The second article that we have here today is about green hydrogen. The article is mainly based on how Gujarat is trying to become a hub for green hydrogen in India. Now, if you actually see, we have discussed earlier as well about why green hydrogen is extremely important and how is it that green hydrogen can change India's future. Now, in simple terms, why green hydrogen is important is because it is a very clean form of fuel. Please understand, there are different forms of hydrogen. You would see somewhere written gray hydrogen, then there's green hydrogen, etc. All these different types of hydrogen, the different colors that you use are based on how the hydrogen is actually being made. If hydrogen is being made by only using renewable resources, that becomes green hydrogen. Apart from that, if you see the other types of hydrogen which are made using other kind of substances, that is a different type of hydrogen. So there are different types of hydrogen that we'll discuss in just a bit. Out of all of them, the cleanest and the one that has the most potential to be used for a cleaner environment is green hydrogen. And the reason being that green hydrogen is made from renewable sources. Why is Gujarat in the news? Because Gujarat is taking a lead. They have signed MOUs, that is Memorandum of Understanding, with multiple corporate houses, inviting them to invest in Gujarat in the field of green hydrogen. So Reliance, the Adani Group, ArcelorMittal, that is very famous for making steel, Torrent, all these companies, these huge multi-billion-dollar companies, have pledged that they will be investing in green energy projects in the state of Gujarat. As you know, the government of India has been focusing on green hydrogen. The government of India also announced this in the budget as well, that government will be focusing a lot on green hydrogen. We even have a national mission for green hydrogen now. You would have seen how government is focusing on using hydrogen as a fuel in buses as well. So there's a national green hydrogen mobility mission as well, how to use hydrogen as a fuel in transportation. For Gujarat specifically, the state of Gujarat is trying to make a new policy for green hydrogen, giving it the status of priority sector, under which it will be easier to get loans from the banks, it will be easier to get some land, etc. from the banks, and they would also get tax breaks. The state cabinet has approved allotment of 1.99 lakh hectares of land near the border areas for this particular project. The government will also give many incentives for those companies who want to invest in green hydrogen. Now, please understand this, whenever any state government has to give a push to any new kind of industry, it can be green hydrogen, it can be, let's say, manufacturing of semiconductor chips, etc. All these are very heavy capital intensive industries. So you can't really expect any common person or a small company to come and set up these kind of manufacturing plants. For that, you have to give them some incentive. You have to attract them. Now, how do you actually give them some incentive? Number one, you give them tax breaks. For example, you tell them that, okay, for the next 3 years, we'll not take any tax from you. You set up your business, keep all your profit. After 3 years, give me the taxes. Or maybe what they do is, government has a lot of land of their own. So government can give them land, either at a subsidized price or free. Because usually whenever a big industry or manufacturing plant is being set up, the biggest expense is usually buying land only. Because when you buy so much land, it takes the initial cost to a very, very high level. So this is how the governments usually help different corporates. There is another aspect of how the government can include them in PLIs, that is performance linked incentive. The government can say the more you produce, the more we will give you subsidy. But at least in the very beginning, the government has to make sure that they contribute in the land. The cost of land has to be reduced somehow, and they also give them tax breaks. Apart from that, it is also important that India gives a push to green hydrogen, because as a part of our nationally determined contribution, as you know, we are trying to achieve net zero by 2070, and we want to reduce our carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. We also hope to have at least half of our energy production from renewable sources. Now, this is easy to say, but to actually achieve it is extremely, extremely difficult. I'll tell you some of the things why is it difficult. If you see green hydrogen, see, just writing that we will produce green hydrogen is very easy. But if you actually see, for example, green hydrogen will be, there is water, you break the water into two parts, hydrogen is separate, oxygen is separate, and then you have hydrogen. But it's not that easy. If it would have been that easy, you just take water in this cup and then start to break it up, prepare hydrogen and prepare oxygen. That is not how it works. It takes a lot of great technology to do this. Secondly, when the green hydrogen is produced, let's say green hydrogen is produced in one place, let's say in Gujarat. Now, how do you transport it to other parts? For example, with petrol and diesel, the good part is you can transport it in the form of trucks, right? For example, the petrol that you get at petrol pumps is not exploited, is not extracted from your city. It was extracted somewhere else, refined, and then by trucks it came to your city, and your petrol pumps, you're now using it. For green hydrogen, how do you transport it? Do you have the infrastructure or not? Then the other problem is when something transports from one state to the other state, then the taxes also come into picture. The state that is producing it will say, no, I will now want to put taxes. The importing state will say, I will not want to put taxes. So there are a lot of these complications here. It's not that easy. In fact, this is the reason why solar energy, although it's a big success, but solar energy still is not really a substitute to any other form of energy. For example, when you say renewable is picking up, that is fine. But even today, there is no permanent solution around the world of how and where can we store solar energy in the daytime so that we can use it in the night time. So renewable energy also has all these problems. Transportation is a problem, storage is a problem, taxation system is a problem. And this is where we are trying to first give a push to manufacturing of green hydrogen, and then we are also trying to ensure that green hydrogen gets transported and is available easily. These are the different types of hydrogen, as I said in the beginning. Green hydrogen is green because it is made using renewable electricity, but then there are other forms of hydrogen as well, turquoise, blue, gray. The difference is how are you making it. So the cleanest form of making hydrogen is the green hydrogen. Then there are other forms as well. This infographic also shows you how exactly do you actually make hydrogen. As I said, it's in simplest of terms, it's about breaking water into two parts. But then it's not that easy that you just take water and then hammer it, it will break up. Yes, there will be some electrolyzers that will be involved so that you can separate hydrogen and oxygen from water. As I said earlier, the government has been giving a lot of push to green hydrogen. We have the National Green Hydrogen Mission, under which by 2030, this is the aim. By 2030, the government of India is hoping to have 5 million metric tons. MMT is million metric tons. The government is hoping to have 5 million metric tons green hydrogen annual production, 60 to 100 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. All these are the targets that the government has set for itself. Whether we would be able to achieve that or not remains to be seen, but this is the target that we have because we are seeing green hydrogen as maybe the problem to India's, or maybe the solution to India's problems of renewable energy. These are some of the important pointers about the National Green Hydrogen Mission. As I said, the government of India has been focusing on green hydrogen. They have even given this budget of over 19,000 crore. The reason why we are so bullish on green hydrogen, why we think it is the way forward, is that we will not really have any shortage of green hydrogen once we are able to understand how to make it properly in large scale and how to transport it. So this becomes extremely important for us because India, being a country where the demand for energy is extremely high, and India being one of the countries that has to reduce its emissions, green hydrogen can be the way forward. All the problems about climate change, global warming, etc. can be controlled with the form or with the help of green hydrogen. As I said, the focus is not just about production, the focus is also about making sure that there is enough transportation facility, building of pipelines, also having a proper tax structure in place so that we do not have complication when it comes to transporting green hydrogen from one state to the other. The government is also inviting the private sector to come in and invest. This is an example that we just saw in Gujarat. The private sector promising the Gujarat government that we will come and we will invest a lot of money in green hydrogen related projects. This was our second mains related article for the day. Okay, let me take up some topics. There is a question from a guy called UPSC Dimangwala. Government is also planning to run hydrogen trains. Yes. As I said, Government of India is planning or has already launched the Green Hydrogen Mobility Mission. So mobility mission means using green hydrogen when it comes to running of any kind of transportation. Then I have a question. So by saying aiming 2070 means that next government will carry forward with the same scheme. See, these are not schemes. So I'll tell you something very interesting. India is different from other countries in a very interesting way, and I want all of you to listen to this carefully. See, India is a democratic country like many other countries around the world, but the great thing with India is ever since our independence, you see that the governments change, but even with the change in the governments, no government actually removes or changes a big policy, especially which is an international policy. I'll give you an example. See, when the first government of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, was in power, they introduced the non-aligned movement. They said that India is a non-aligned country. Now, it doesn't matter which government came in power after that, India still remained a non-aligned country only. So what happens is, in India's case, fortunately, change in government doesn't really mean change in international policy especially. For example, if Congress government decided that we will invest in Chabahar port, it's not that Modi government came in and said, no, we'll not do that. No, they continue it usually. You can talk about many things. You can talk about the Look East policy. Look East policy introduced in 1991 by P.V. Narasimha Rao government, Congress government. It went on ahead and it's still continuing. It has become even more aggressive now. It has been called as the Act East policy. So if you see, India doesn't really have a history, thankfully, where all of a sudden you have abrupt policy changes. It may happen internally. Internally, there may be some scheme and the other party comes and changes it. But in India, usually at the international level, when we have a scheme related to a foreign policy, we usually do not see a change, which is a very, very good thing. Because see, what happens is, countries around the world never appreciate another country changing their policy time and time again. This is exactly what happened in America. When Donald Trump came to power, all of a sudden he started announcing that no, America is not a part of Paris Climate Deal Summit, we are out of it. Then they said that I am not a part of the Iran nuclear deal, I am walking out of it. Then he said I am not a part of WHO, we walked out of it. Then he said I am not a part of UNESCO, walked out of it. So what is happening is, when you change leadership and you change policies all of a sudden, that's not really a mark of a developed country. India is very lucky in that sense. Doesn't matter which government comes in, usually in most cases you will not see any change in at least foreign policy. There may be some changes, one or two small little changes here and there, but there is no big overhaul that you will ever see. So I don't think that if the next government comes in, they will say that no, we will not achieve net zero by 2070, we will achieve by 2090. I don't think that is going to happen. Then I have a question. Persona non grata, yes. I think Rahul has already answered those who were asking. Good, thank you, Rahul. Then, okay, Misbah is saying how renewable energy help in producing green hydrogen. So Misbah, I'll tell you in very simple terms. How is green hydrogen produced? There is water. You break water with the help of electricity. So you run electricity through it, you break water, and it becomes hydrogen is separate and oxygen is separate. Green hydrogen means that the electricity that you are using to break water, that electricity was produced using renewable energy. That is the idea. So if you have green hydrogen, that means the electricity that is being used to produce that hydrogen, that comes from renewable energy. So in the entire cycle of producing green hydrogen, you do not have any bad or any dirty energy or whatever you want to call it. That is the entire idea. Okay, I'll take one last question. How will the government reduce the per unit cost of green hydrogen, because it's very costly at present? See, any new technology that comes in will always be costly in the beginning. It will only reduce the cost when the scale becomes much higher. And this is not the only one. You can talk about solar. When solar energy first started, it was very costly about 10 years back. And now the rates for solar energy has dropped down so much that it has become almost the same as hydropower and even cheaper in some cases. So the more you scale, the cheaper it becomes. Any new technology in the beginning will always be costly. I remember when I was a kid and I used to be in school, one of the relatives actually in my city, they went to Singapore for a trip and they bought with themselves a laptop. And we saw the laptop for the first time. And as a kid, they were not even allowing us to touch it, that no, don't touch it. This is a laptop we bought from Singapore. It was a 1 lakh rupee laptop. And now that I think of it, it was just a box. It had no features, no functions. Now if you see this, the price that you have to pay for a laptop as compared to what you had to pay about 15, 20 years back, it has come down considerably. Because again, when you build something at scale, the price always comes down. As simple as that. And the same will happen with green hydrogen as well. Let's go ahead then. From the prelims point of view also, we have some interesting news stories today. First, the center government has, as expected, not been very welcoming of the Supreme Court judgment when the Supreme Court had said that services will be controlled by Delhi government. The center government has given or has issued an ordinance, the ordinance which has reversed the order of the Supreme Court. So, a very quick reminder, we have discussed this earlier as well. What happened was, the Supreme Court had given a verdict where they had to decide who will have control over the services, that is IAS, IPS officer working in Delhi, their transfer, etc. Who will decide that? Will it be the government of Delhi or the Lieutenant Governor? In that case, the Supreme Court had decided that the government of Delhi will decide all these orders. Now, what happened was, the government of India was not happy with it. They wanted that the Lieutenant Governor should be given more powers to decide all these cases. That is why an ordinance now has been issued. Now, what does the ordinance say? Please understand this. The ordinance says that there will be an authority set up called National Capital Civil Services Authority. So, a new authority has been set up. This authority will have 3 people as the members. First, the Chief Minister of Delhi. Second, the Chief Secretary and the Principal Home Secretary of Delhi. So it's a 3-member body, 3-member authority. It's kind of a board. They will decide on the transfer and the working conditions of the bureaucrats in Delhi. But the problem is, they will only advise to the Lieutenant Governor. They will only advise to a Lieutenant Governor. At the end of the day, it will be the Lieutenant Governor who will take the final decision. This is what the ordinance is. The ordinance is that now onwards, transfer and all these working conditions of the services in Delhi will be determined by this 3-member body. They will give the recommendations to the Lieutenant Governor, who will then take the final call. Now, this obviously is not being appreciated by the Delhi government. They are saying that as usual statements come in, that Delhi, democracy is being killed, center government is not respecting the Supreme Court, whatever. But again, whatever has happened is at least through the law. You might or might not like it, but that is how the law is in India. I am sure all of you would have read about how ordinances work, how ordinances are. Just to remind you, ordinance is a kind of an extraordinary power given to the President of India. The President of India can issue an ordinance on all those matters on which the Parliament can make a law. The condition is at least one House of Parliament should not be in session. Please remember, the condition is at least one House of Parliament should not be in session. If both are not in session, even better, but at least one House of the Parliament should not be in session. Now, as you know, the ordinance is usually, it's an extraordinary power which is given so that just in case the government immediately wants to bring in a law and the Parliament is not in session, they should have an alternative to it. That is why the ordinance powers have been given. But ordinances have been misused as well quite a lot. Whenever the Parliament session gets over, the governments usually issue ordinances because they know that they may not be able to get this law passed by the Parliament. Now, the problem here is, since the governments, doesn't matter which party is in power, since the governments have this tendency of misusing the ordinance, the Supreme Court in the R.C. Cooper case of 1970, the R.C. Cooper case was the famous case of bank nationalization. In the R.C. Cooper case, the Supreme Court had said that President's decision could be challenged in the Supreme Court, the decision to bring in ordinance, on the grounds that immediate action was not required and the government could have waited for the session to begin. Let me repeat. Ordinance power is usually given so that the government can make a law if it is needed immediately and the Parliament is not in session. The Supreme Court in 1970 said that we can actually decide if there was an urgent requirement for the ordinance or not. If it was not required urgently, we can remove the ordinance. But what happened? 38th Amendment Act at the time of Indira Gandhi government, they introduced another amendment to overtake or overrule the Supreme Court order. 1970, Supreme Court said ordinances can be challenged. Government of India by 30th Amendment Act said no, President's satisfaction cannot be challenged in the court. This was the Indira Gandhi government. But that was not the end of the story. Then came the 44th Amendment Act, 1978, Janata Party government. the Janata Party government, because it was against the Congress government, they were trying to change everything that the Indira Gandhi government had done. They again changed the constitution, said that once again ordinances are justiciable. Meaning that once again the ordinances can be challenged in the Supreme Court if there was no urgent requirement to have this law. Let me remind once again, 1970 Supreme Court said ordinances can be challenged. Government of India by 30th Amendment Act said no, they can't be challenged. Then again by 44th Amendment Act, it was said that ordinances can be challenged. So whether or not this ordinance will be challenged, it remains to be seen, but at least the battle between the Delhi government and the central government doesn't seem to be over anytime soon. Let me see if there are any other questions before we go ahead. Yes, Ashu, judicial review is now allowed then. Vidhi, no, Janata Party is not BJP. Janata Party was, so what happened was when Indira Gandhi government had imposed emergency, what they had done was they had thrown all the opposition leaders into the jails and they remained in jail for over 1 year. So against the Congress, all the parties had combined to make one party called the Janata Party. So Janata Party or the Janata Dal was actually the combination of all these parties that had combined. It had the Jan Sangh also, which became BJP later on. It had many small parties that had combined. That became the Janata Party. It was the Janata Party rule under which Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister of India when the emergency had ended and the elections were called in 1976. Rahul is saying reason for Kiren Rijiju's disqualification. No. Let's not say disqualification. This is called cabinet reshuffle. There's nothing called disqualification. He got another law ministry, as simple as that. The reason he knows or the Prime Minister knows, I am not Kiren Rijiju and not the Prime Minister, so I don't know. Swati saying who can issue ordinances? Swati, ordinances at the center government will be issued by the President, at the state will be issued by governors. Since Delhi is a union territory, for them ordinances will be issued by the President of India. Jay, none of the houses is in session right now. Neither Lok Sabha nor the Rajya Sabha is in session right now. Piyush is saying, does center government has the power to deny Supreme Court decision? Not officially. What they can do is they can overturn the decision by amending the law. This is what they have done this time. So when the Supreme Court decision comes in, the government of India doesn't like it, they can make a new law over it, and that is how decision can be changed. But they can't deny that we will not follow decision because that will be called the contempt of court. Okay, the next important news is that the Supreme Court again is back to 34 judges with 2 new judges being appointed. Now, just remember just a couple of days back we did discuss that the Collegium had recommended the name of 2 judges. Remember, just a couple of days back in the CNA we did discuss this, that the name of 2 judges, and I gave you the homework also about Indu Malhotra. Remember? Now, this is very extraordinary because usually when the Collegium recommends a name to the government, they take some time, a few weeks usually, to do a background check on the judges. But what has happened is, within 48 hours, just 2 days back, the Collegium gave the name to the President, and within 2 days, the oath taking has also happened. This is a welcome change. This did not really happen earlier. This is a welcome change here, in which you see that the government has not delayed the appointment. The government has said, okay, we will accept whoever the judges are. If you remember, we had discussed there were 2 judges, one from the Chhattisgarh High Court, that is Justice Prashant Kumar Mishra, and one very well-renowned senior advocate, that is Mr. K.V. Vishwanathan. These are the 2 people who have been appointed, who have been administered the oath by the Chief Justice of India. As I said, it's come at an extraordinary speed within 48 hours. This is a very, very welcome change because in the past few months, what was happening was the government of India was delaying the appointment of judges for a long, long time, for many, many weeks. And this was one of the reasons why the Supreme Court and the government were actually face to face. So this seems to be a welcome change here. I told you that day as well, Mr. Vishwanathan is an advocate. So from advocate straight away, he is becoming the Supreme Court judge. As all of you should know, to become a Supreme Court judge, you have to fulfill one of any 3 qualifications. Either you should be a High Court judge for 5 years, or you should be a High Court advocate for 10 years, or you should be a distinguished jurist. Remember, these are the things that we had discussed. Now, please remember, from the jurist part, distinguished jurist, no judge ever has been appointed. So there is no Supreme Court judge so far that was or who was from this category of distinguished jurist. Now, who is a jurist usually? Jurist is a person who is not a judge, not an advocate, but has a lot of knowledge of law. I'll give you an example. So there are law universities. So for example, let's say someone is teaching in the law university, professor of law. So he is not a lawyer, he is not a judge, but he would have a lot of knowledge about law. So that can be a jurist. Or let's say someone who has done PhD in the field of law. So because let's assume, see, when you have done your BA LLB or MA LLB, most of them after that become lawyers. But some of them don't become lawyers, then they go to teach in the teaching profession. They can be called as jurist. So no one so far has become a Supreme Court judge from this field. Most of the appointments always happen from the first criteria. Most of the appointments of Supreme Court judge are from this criteria, High Court judge for 5 years. The advocate criteria has been used, but it is very, very, very rare. How rare? See, this is how rare it is. Mr. Vishwanathan is only the 9th lawyer to become the Supreme Court judge directly. Just the 9th in the history of India. So as I told you that day also, very rare. And the homework I gave you, which I was very glad to see most of you mentioned in the chat, Indu Malhotra was the first women to be in this list. But so far, only 9 lawyers have directly come as Supreme Court judge. Because usually what happens, the usual, if you see the history, usually the High Court advocate is first appointed as a High Court judge. And then from High Court judge, the person is elevated to Supreme Court judge. That is the usual manner in which how the promotion happens. But in extraordinary cases, as you see here, you can directly come to the Supreme Court as well. And if all goes to plan, he would also get to become the Chief Justice of India in August 2030. He will not be the first lawyer, then Supreme Court judge and the Chief Justice of India. He would be, if that actually happens, it would be the 4th such scenario. It would be 4th such scenario where a lawyer who has become a Supreme Court judge then goes on to actually become the Chief Justice of India if all goes to plan. There are other judges also that are retiring very soon in 2023. Many other judges are retiring. Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, who is number 2 right now in seniority, K.M. Joseph, Ajay Rastogi, a lot of these judges are retiring. So there will be many other vacancies coming in very soon. Also, as you know, the appointment of judges is something that remains in the news quite a lot. It's a very debated topic in India. This is how judges in other countries are appointed, as you can see here. I'll give you an example of US. So in US, there's a very interesting method. In US, for example, number 1, they don't have a retirement age for their Supreme Court judges. In India, we have a retirement age for 65. In US, there is no retirement age for Supreme Court judges. So basically in US, you can see a judge working till 85, 90 also. They can retire if they want themselves, but there's no forceful retirement, number 1. Secondly, in US, the president of the US has so much powers. He will nominate a person as the judge, and then the Senate, that is the upper house, they will just have to confirm the judge by voting. So there are different methods how election actually happens, or the appointment of the judge happens. In some cases, there are committees that are formed. In some cases, only judges appoint. India has its own unique method of the collegium. This is also an infographic that gives you some important revision points about the 3 judges cases, the 1982, 93, 98. I hope all of you know about this. In the NJAC, all of this is given here. You can revise it very quickly. Okay, before I jump on to the last one, quickly, Nikita is saying, aren't there any exams for becoming a judge? Nikita, there are exams for becoming a judge, but then you don't become a Supreme Court judge straight away. There are exams that is called the PCSG or PCS judicial exam that you can become, basically you can start as a subordinate judge and then you have to go up. So the exam doesn't qualify you to straight away become the Supreme Court judge. Yes, Sanskar, it would be sufficient. Suchandra is saying, what is the role of a jurist? Suchandra, role of a jurist, as I said, jurist can be professor of law who would teach, researcher of law who would have done PhD, etc. Simple. Ashwini is saying, why didn't you take the topic of 2000 rupee note? Because it's just a one-line topic, and you know the 2000 rupee note is going out of circulation, as simple as that. What else do you want in this topic? Neha is saying, what is jurisdiction? Yeah, jurisdiction means basically the area or the power that you have. What are the kind of cases that you can hear? That is called jurisdiction. Let's go ahead then. The last article that we have here is about arsenic exposure and the impact that it can have on the cognitive ability, as all of we know. There's a report that has come out that if our food, and unfortunately there is some arsenic contamination in our food, if our food has arsenic even in very small quantities, it can have a devastating impact on children, adolescents and young adults. It can reduce your gray matter. Gray matter is that part of the brain which is important for your cognitive functions. It can hinder your ability to switch between tasks, hinder your ability to store information, etc. That is why it is extremely, extremely important to put an end to arsenic contamination. Now, how is arsenic contamination happening? So there is a lot of factors. For example, a lot of industries, when they move out or when they actually throw out their waste, they don't recycle it, they don't clean it, they just throw out the waste without treating it. So non-treatment of waste going out, that also becomes a problem, because of which these chemicals such as the arsenic make their way into our soil, make their way into our water systems, and this is where it becomes very, very dangerous for all of us. West Bengal, Jharkhand, UP, Assam, Manipur, Bihar, these are the regions which have a very high arsenic level. And when it comes into our food, that becomes a big problem. Now, usually because most of our food items that we have are cooked items, so cooking helps us reduce a lot of these chemicals. For example, cooking rice in a certain way can remove your arsenic by about over half of them. But again, you cannot always be sure, because any amount of arsenic going into your body can become a problem. How is the Government of India controlling it? Government of India is encouraging piped water rather than groundwater extraction. So you don't just have to take out groundwater, consume it. Rather than that, you should depend on piped water. But the problem is, piped water is not a reality in all parts of the country. There are still some parts of the country where piped water is not accessible. And this is why you can suggest to people that you should only offer piped water, but that again is not accessible to everyone. This is about information about arsenic. If you want, this is the atomic number of arsenic, atomic weight. This is how arsenic looks like. Looks like me not in real life, but this is how arsenic actually tells you all the information that you need to know. The food contamination problem in arsenic or in the form of arsenic especially occurs in rice, wheat, potato because it grows underground. This is why the Government of India has been trying to ensure that the farmers also keep on checking their soil, keep on ensuring that the soil has only those nutrients which are safe for the body. The arsenic contamination in groundwater also has been a growing concern. Groundwater which has been used for irrigation, all these become a major health problem for the entire country. The food that we intake has much more arsenic as compared to drinking water, even though the drinking water also has a problem, especially when you just take out water from the ground and consume it without cleaning it up. This is also a report from the Government of India about how different states have population affected with arsenic. As you can see, population in UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Assam are mainly affected with arsenic, a lot more as compared to the other states in India. This brings us to the end of today's discussion. As always, there are a couple of practice questions here for all of you. First, evaluate India's progress on various sustainable development goals. Identify some of the initiatives taken by the Government of India in this regard. Second, green hydrogen may hold the key to solving India's renewable energy issues. Discuss. Try and write the answers to these questions as well. I hope you learned something new today. If you do, make sure that you have already subscribed to our YouTube channel. If not, do that. You can invite your other friends as well. Leave in the comment section how are you finding the videos and if there is anything that you would like us to cover more than that. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow 10 a.m. once again. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.